Welcome to Market Buzz. I'm Greg Schnell, the Canadian technician and host of the Market Buzz. Each show we do a deep dive into different industries using weekly charts to see what is happening on a long timeline. Please follow me on Twitter at Schnell Investor, and you can also find my blogs on gregschnell.com as well as stockcharts.com. So, this week we want to cover off something interesting called semiconductors, and we're going to chip away at it a little bit. I'm trying to figure out a couple of things on the whole semiconductor area, and what I can't get my head around is why semiconductors aren't performing a little bit better, and I'm going to show you what I mean. So last week we had a big boom, right? Technology was big. Semiconductors are within the technology area. Technology was up 4.67 or 6.4. Semiconductors were up like a quarter of what the rest of the group was doing. So I find that pretty odd. And out of, these are sectors, but this one, a few of these listed on this list are just industry groups. But what I find odd here is how weak this is compared to the rest. And so that's one of the reasons I wanted to dig in and just see what's going on in the semiconductor space. So let's head over there and take a look at it. First thing I want to do is just show you what's going on in the overall market, just to give you a context. So here's the NASDAQ 100. Pretty much looks like an uptrend from March 25th onward. Pretty much straight up marching. We really cleared new highs today in a relatively dramatic fashion. Started on the lows and closed pretty much on the highs. Got to 14,000, pretty big bullish level. Volume was in line with the last couple of days, so everything seems fine. And our PPO momentum got right up to some of the highs we saw all the way through. So that looks pretty good. When we get into the weekly, everything's okay here. We have the PPO trying to cross its signal line again, and it would be bullish to kind of pop up and do that. One of the questions I have is we had, why is semiconductors so weak with this as a backdrop, with everything kind of moving up? And I really don't have a good answer for it. When we go look at the S&P 500, again, this has got most of the large cap tech in there, so it's not going to be too different, but you can see we didn't have as big a pullback and we did take off, so we're at 4150 now. A relatively strong push, and everything looks like it's heading higher here. Our PPO's back up to one of the highest levels it's been, so everything is registering very, very strong. Nothing to argue about here. So why is semiconductors weak? And quite frankly, I wanted to dig into the data and just go through it. So I'll show you how I got to the data and then how you can go through it. So first of all, just from the home page here, when StockCharts your dashboard, go down here and you're going to just say that you want to do a new scan. And on this new scan, you're going to grab it. And then down here in the bottom corner, you're going to choose, you want to scroll down to technology as an example. And here's semiconductors, and then you say, and it's clicked on the US. If you wanted Canadian, you'd go that way. But you just go grab semiconductors from the list and hit add. That puts it up in this box, and then you'd run the scan. Now when you do that, you're going to get this result. I don't want to change it because I've already put the numbers on the front. But you can sort it based on whatever you wanted to. Today I sorted it on the SCTR ranking. And once you have the order set and you want to add the numbers to the front, you would just go down here and click number in sorted order. And actually that was the tab that was before. I resorted it. So here we are where they're sorted in this order with the scooter ranking. So that's how I got there really quick. It's not that hard. Very quickly pop up a quick scan, run it, save it in a chart list, sort the chart list by whatever you want. You could have done based on the last, whatever, changes over the last day. You could have done changes over the last week. Whatever, just to see what's moving. All of these are viable methods. It's really however you want to present the data. So anyway, I picked to sort on the SCTR ranking, and then from that, once we get in here, one thing I want to show you, so here's the SCTR ranking, and this is one of the top stocks in the group. lots of volume, and it comes up with a 5-year. You can change that to say 2-year, whatever you want. And then in order to change all of the charts in the list, you would just go down to the bottom here and apply style to all, whatever changes you want to make. In this case, I just want to have it over a shorter period of time on the chart. So here's one of the top semiconductor stocks. It's got a scooter ranking. Here's the actual number for it, 99.5. This thing is on fire. Look what it's doing so far this week. It's down 15%, and the NASDAQ keeps climbing higher. So that kind of puzzles me, right? Why would it be so weak? Well, when we go look through the data, and we could go through either view all or chart book or whatever, I'm just going to flip through here. So we still have this uptrend in relative strength. That's bullish. We still have an uptrend in price. That's still bullish. And we still have an uptrend here on our PPO, but you can see this is very close to breaking this trend line. And for me, one of the things I noticed about, and you could notice it too, about the PPO is you tend to get a long run, and then it pulls down and it almost gives you something to lay your line on, and then it tries to bounce up and away and then drops back over. Now, when you get that second drop back over, you just want to be aware that your momentum is changing. Now, I could flip out to something different, whatever. Let me just go up and get, say, dollar copper and do the same thing. And so you get this weekly chart, and you see the same thing here. Now, in this case, it's flipped over, but it's, it keeps migrating higher. We don't know if it's going to do that or if it's just going to flip over and then roll all the way down. So it's just something that I kind of have grown to watch for over time. And the one thing that I would say is when you start to see this kind of pullback and a last rally, and the rally doesn't really get going, usually in time duration it's shorter than this kind of bigger bump. Just be aware that the momentum might be slipping a little bit. So anyway, one of the things that I always want to watch for is my PPO reading, just to get a feel for, am I still migrating higher? Where am I at? Have I just broken out? So when we go to the next chart, here's Lam Research. And of course, all of these semiconductor stocks are having trouble with supply. And when you see this, I would expect this group to be effervescent, right? Going higher and higher and higher. But here you see a trend line on PPO momentum, and it's just rolling over, giving us, it's still positive, where this first number is the actual PPO reading. This is the signal line, and this is the difference. So it's still above the signal line. But again, we'd be watching for this big uptrend in momentum, which has been going on for a year. If this started to break, we'd want to be more careful. Now, it doesn't take very long for us to work our way down before we start to see these breaking. So this one is very, very bullish. We're up nice and high. I haven't quite got across on the signal line. Chart's still trending higher. This was $6 in March and $27 here 2 weeks ago. So, or last week. So pretty bullish, even if you got into the 25, right? That's a big multiplier. But from the November rally, this was a rough double. So pretty solid response. The real question is, why nothing since February? And, is it just trying to get its momentum back up to turn higher like we've seen on some of the other larger cap tech stocks? Or are we starting to see the end of the momentum in the semiconductors? So this is Brooks PRI Automation. And what you see here is our PPO trend line has now broken, and it's just starting to kind of wiggle sideways. The stock actually is still climbing here. It made higher highs last week, but closed pretty much on the lows. And this week so far, just oscillating. This is Tuesday night, just oscillating right around the close from last week. We're up 1%. And again, this is one of the strongest stocks in the semiconductor space. So here's Micron. And, the one question I'm starting to have on all of these semiconductors is, okay, so if that's where I put my line, that's fine. I can also take it all the way back here and make a very flat line. But I don't think you want to wait until this thing goes from, call it $95 to $70 or $75 before you start to realize it's topping out. I think I want a line that's a little more aggressive, probably something in either this range or in this range. And if it's going to start to go below the 10-week moving average and break my signal line, my PPO is giving me a sell signal, I at least want to be aware of the magnitude of the trend change. And one of my other favorite indicators is when something that was outperforming against the S&P 500 starts to underperform. I want to be aware of that. And here's Micron. In this case, this is just starting to tick down below my uptrend line, so that's not really a look I want to see. So I would say this chart's on a hard watch for me. Again, the Nasdaq's closed up, and here we are sitting here with a minus 3% on Micron, breakdown in relative strength through the trend line, still holding the price trend line and trying to hold on the 10-week or the 50-day moving average, but the PPO has already rolled over and given me a sell signal. So I've got a sell signal here, sell signal here, and I sure do want to get one in here. I'd like to see it bounce very quickly. So anyway, to me, that stock starts to look pretty darn weak, and I want to make sure I protect the gains I've got in it. Looking at Advanced Semi, this one had a big run from $4 to $9, a quick pullback to 6, 7, I guess. So a quick drop there of near 30%, and then coming up, and it's just kind of riding the 10-week line. You can see on the PPO we've already got a sell signal. Relative strength is breaking the uptrend as well, just like we saw on Micron. And again, my logic on the relative strength is when something that was outperforming stops outperforming the S&P, we have to think about why that might be. And it doesn't mean like go into the specifics of what's going on in sales and what's that, all of that. It just means here we have something that was outperforming and now it's stopped outperforming. Is it about to underperform? And so if you think about all of 2020 and how bullish it was, from March, the stock, I mean, it doesn't look like it did much, but in this case, it went from $3 to $5, which is just getting back to the prior highs. But the big issue is it barely got above its 40-week moving average in green here. And until September, October didn't even really break out. So it was pretty much a forgotten name. And then all of a sudden, a nice double pops up off the November dip. United Micro, you could just see the big uptrend here is broken. Full stochastic is now bouncing off the 20% line. And the real question is, does it have any jam to get back above this 10-week, or is it just going to come up here and roll over? Have to watch that pretty closely. The scooter ranking's been positive for 18 months. It's been a really nice climber. This one started closer to June here. Started to work its way higher from $2 to $11. So I think we'd all like to be a part of that ride. But now it's pulled back into the $8 and is sitting just in the $9 range. I think when we start to get stocks like this, at least it's had some sort of a pullback. So if you're looking for the turn back up, you want to find some sort of signal you want to use. Is that your full stochastic, your PPO, relative strength starts to break a downtrend? Any of those would be at least a place to start looking to try and find something better. So the stock is, the PPO is still holding up very well, but it's because this move was so strong that even this, this pullback of whatever, $3 on 11, or when you get a pullback that big, it's not going to break the measurement inside the scooter ranking because of how far is it above its 40-week moving average, how far is it above its 10-week moving average. All of those are part of the calculations. Well, this is still a very heady distance. It's almost a double from $5 to $11 at the high here, and now we're still, call it $7 to 9 something. It's a pretty heady level. So want to just keep an eye on it. I don't like the scooter ranking for a sell signal so much. It's more like a confirmation of a sell signal, but I'm probably going to get a relative strength breakdown first, a price breakdown, PPO trendline breakdown. All of those would start to kick off before I'd kind of rely on the scooter ranking, especially for something fast moving. So here's Cohu, C-O-H-U, and again, just pretty much since the, I'll call it first part of December, the stock's been 35 to 50 and pulled all the way back recently, bouncing back up, trying to get back into that zone. PPO is trying to hold on a big uptrend here. Let's just draw that in. So we'd like to see that hold. Is it going to come down and bounce off this? This 20% level is very, very high. You don't see that very often. Well, you'll see it in growth stocks, but my point would be, if you just look at the average stock on the exchanges, a 20% PPO is a very, very high level, suggesting a lot of momentum. So anyway, this stock here is currently testing prior highs, and the real question is, can it keep its momentum turning back up? And we're only 9 stocks off the top of the list here, but we're already down 3% this week in what's an up week for the NASDAQ. So once again, why is all of a sudden these tech stocks, why are they starting to slip, or the semiconductor stocks starting to slip relative to the index? I don't have an answer for it yet. But when we draw our trend lines in here, so we got this one sitting here nicely, got an uptrend in price. Everything looks pretty good. This was quite a move from whatever, $26, $20, picking level $25, and ran up to 63. So it's been a pretty heady run. And now it just, after last week, it looks like it's stalling a little bit, but that was quite a euphoric surge from 50 to 63. Working through KLAC, again, another, all of these stocks have nice uptrends. The real question I'm asking this week is, why are we all of a sudden starting to threaten breaking these trend lines? And the reason I want to point that out is because if all of a sudden semi's starting to break, that's one of the concerns for me. Is I don't normally I don't want to see semis kind of lead us lower. So that looks pretty good. Now, one of the other backdrops, I'm going to keep going in the semis. I just want to show you one other thing. So in the overall view of the markets, one of the theories that I like to think about is, how are the smaller stock markets doing if they don't have the presence of the large caps that the NASDAQ has, Apple, Microsoft, that kind of thing, and they start to roll over? That can be a clue of overall market weakness. And so there's a reason to at least let those other markets, even if you don't trade them, just use them as indicators. Are the smaller markets in the world starting to break down? And then I have another example of that, where I just, if I just went and took my NASDAQ advanced decline line, here's something really quite odd. So the NASDAQ is making higher highs, but the advanced decline line for the NASDAQ is clearly making lower highs. Even today's stock market was up, and yet advanced decline data was down. And then our 2-week moving average has already gone negative. Now you can see the last two actually marked pullbacks in the stock market, and yet here we are negative for the last 2 weeks, or over the last 2 weeks we've actually got to a negative level for our moving average. But it can do that, and we did it back in June, July, August, and the market kept trundling higher. And the reason it keeps trundling higher is because the large caps, Apple, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, all those, are carrying the load, and literally as long as they're moving higher, the market's probably going higher. Meanwhile, if you own any of the underlying, it could be falling away on you. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to point out this weakness in semiconductors, or apparent weakness. It's not major yet, but we're only 10 stocks in out of a group of 100. And whatever, let's just go down to some of the bigger names. Here's a form factor. You could just see this PPO has rolled over quite meaningfully. It's been declining for 3 or 4 months in momentum. Stock hasn't really gone anywhere since first or second week of January. It was at 48, made it all the way up to 51 recently, and back to right in that area. So it's at 49. considering how far the stock market has run up, it's a little bit surprising to me that this hasn't been able to make a bigger move. Lattice, this is a nice clean chart. Snap a trend line here. You could even take one with a more shallow slope, something maybe in there. And the point I would make on this is, yes, the stock is still moving up. The real question is why is it starting to change its performance level? Like, we have this situation kind of sitting here for the first 3 months of the year where the S&P was up almost 7%. So it's just one of the things that I want to start to keep our eyes on is, are these semiconductors going to start to kind of, fix their momentum and get going in a positive direction, or are we going to keep having these pullbacks? So I sorted based on the scooter ranking, and one of the examples would be that NVDA was actually a scooter ranking of around 65% or something like that. It was actually, I thought, quite surprisingly low. And so when we look at this, the stock hasn't really been doing much, and then all of a sudden today, and I realized they had their investor day or whatever, but this thing literally is leaping out of bed, and a nice breakout on NVIDIA. And to me, this one looks like a buy when you get that kind of a nice move above prior resistance. PPOs had a chance to relax from last September, starting to turn up. And again, some of the other large cap tech names have done the same recently, all started to turn up and break out to new highs. So when I look at an NVIDIA, this one looks more likely for higher highs. I'm not going to be quite as worried as not worried isn't the right word, but if I'm expecting to continue to outperform, the chart, I want to see this sort of a chart where it just keeps climbing up and to the right and looks pretty solid. So this one looks good, NXP Semiconductor. Now, one of the questions somebody might have is, how can the scooter ranking be less on this one than on some of the other ones? Well, again, it's based on how the model is designed. So it's got 6 indicators. You don't kind of adjust the indicators to fit the system. So in this case, the mark, it is going higher, but some of those other stocks actually moved higher faster and then have started to, I'll call it, pull back or release a little, or lose a little of the inflated rate of change that they had, and will come back in, and maybe they'll start and reignite their change. There's still nothing wrong with this chart. This chart was 130 in September, 216 in April. I think that's a definition of an uptrend. It looks like it was smooth before, it's smooth now, and as long as that maintains itself, that's probably a good thing. And you can just see back here, momentum was just gently continuing to trend nicely, and the stock, was probably an easier hold, just with that sort of nice calm chart pattern. Here's Ambarella, and again, sudden run from the beginning in November to 128. It's got to be, the investing world is hard, and one of the things that makes it hard is you don't know. We had some stocks that did nothing for 6 months or 8 months, and then all of a sudden one of them turns and breaks out. So that's why we use breakouts above resistance as a method to try and find strong stocks. And all of a sudden, this one pretty much had a 1-year downtrend, and then literally goes from $58 to $128 very quickly in about 15 or 18 weeks. So a really nice double, and then pulls back from 130 to 100. And again, can it turn around and start to turn up? Full stochastic suggests it's getting close to perhaps a level to bounce at. But one of the things you want to try and do is capture as much profit as you can. So when you start to see, for me, when I start to see something break an uptrend like that in relative strength, I'm going to consider either trying to control my position size or sell or change my position size. That would be a very good clue. You can see the PPO was starting to lose its momentum as well. So when you start to see those changes in the stock, you have to decide, are you a long-term holder, or are you just going to try and take the profits you can get and then move on to the next trade? In this particular case, I mean, it's probably still a strong stock. I'm just saying if you're trying to avoid the near 30% pullback, that would be one of the tools I would use to try and do that. Now, we talked about NVDA. Here's Taiwan Semiconductor. Again, I would have expected this chart to be rock solid, but it's clearly broke its trend line in my method of charting. And then when we go here, here's that really big pocket on the PPO, comes down, touches, takes off, and then fails to really make another move, and that's not a bad place to be cautious. You've got your uptrend in relative strength. It's starting to break. So whether it was the PPO or the relative strength, in this case the scooter also popped below 75. Nothing saying it's going to become the worst stock in the index. It's just, if you're trying to manage trends and keep the profits as you get them, then you need to employ some sell signal. If you're a buy and holder, just get a great stock and hold it, and it'll go through the market oscillations. That's another way of doing it. I would just say, in this case, these are the kind of signals I'm looking for to kick me out of a stock. And some of these semiconductor names are giving them, and they're the big semiconductor names too. Here's Texas Instruments. It's been a pretty strong one lately. That chart is still up and to the right. PPO has gone flat, but at a very high level, up around 6 or 7%. And it's just holding up there. You've got your relative strength here. I would say this is a stock that would give me a little bit of fit, and the real reason is because if I kept the stock short like this, it would start to break, then break, then break, then another break, then it was a false break. So now you draw your line like this. Sometimes on some of these, you just have to decide, am I just going to put it flat? Because the trend is relatively smooth on the stock. Just hit a new high. No real reason to be too concerned. I would say full stochastic starting to give you a little sell. Volume starting to decline the last few weeks. Is that a big deal? Not yet. I would just say, the stock still looks strong enough to me. I'd probably try and hold it. But if you're starting to see, find some clues that you want to look for, a lower low on the PPO starts to break a relative strength base here around, this is going back 6 months. If it all of a sudden starts to make 6-month lows, do you still want to hold it? That kind of thing. Okay, so hopefully that gives you an idea of just how to go find some stocks, go take a look at them, and then see how you want to use them. This Skyworks stock, good friend of mine, Chris, introduced me to the name, years ago, and it's just been a really nice stock. It's part of the 5G. And you can see moving up and to the right, he doesn't trade in and out of it. It's basically above the 40-week moving average here, so a nice hold. In this case, the one thing I would start to draw on this stock, just because of the other names in the group are starting to wobble a little bit, is can it hold this uptrend level here? And for me, I would want to add protection or reduce position size or something if all of a sudden it starts to break down from a couple of these clues. But those are just to try and give you some ideas. Anyway, so not saying semiconductors are horrible. I'm just saying that, if we go look at the summary list here, we have all those stocks above 75. So we have a good 25 stocks here that are outperforming the market. We have the other 75 that are not really doing that well. So just be careful if you're in the chips. Thanks for taking the time to join me on Market Buzz. Market Buzz airs Wednesday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern. You can also see the recording on StockCharts TV YouTube page. Thanks for taking the time to join me. Have a good week. Safe trading. Bye-bye.
Hey, Grayson Rose here with StockCharts. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, consider giving it a like down below, maybe leave us a comment, and if you're new to the channel, you can subscribe at the link up above. We're gonna bring you daily content from an incredible collection of technical analysts and financial experts.